While capitalists profit off of their destructive production choices, the people selling their labor power to those capitalists to survive, aka the working class, face the brunt of these companies' destruction in the form of wage exploitation and workplace pollution that seeps out into communities and the environment. Unlike the rich who have the luxury of shielding themselves from the worst of the climate change they've caused, the working class often live in communities hit hardest by these crises. They exist in what a working paper from the UN calls a vicious cycle of inequality, wherein initial inequality increases people's exposure to climate hazards like droughts or hurricanes, as well as increases the potential damage that those disasters could cause. And once a disaster has passed, this inequality decreases the ability of those who have been exploited to adequately recover from those disasters, making them even more vulnerable to the next crisis. Essentially, the centuries of dispossession of the working class at the hands of capitalists means they are especially vulnerable to the threats of climate change. But unfortunately, environmental policymakers seem to ignore that climate chaos is rooted in the unequal possession of production concentrated in the hands of the few. In November of 2018, the famous Parisian Champs-Élysées turned into a hellscape. Burning cars set the night aflame as protesters wearing yellow vests clashed against heavily armed riot police. This was the beginning of the Yellow Vest protests that rocked France for months. These protests are a perfect example of why environmental action needs to address class inequality. Sparked by Emmanuel Macron's environmental proposal of raising the gasoline tax, millions of working class French folk took to the streets. Their reason was quite simple. The fuel tax was yet another proposed policy that disproportionately burdened people who were barely making ends meet. So even though Macron was trying to create action that might reduce emissions, it did so in a way that demanded the working class consume less, while capitalists who own the fossil fuel companies and car production facilities that are actually driving emissions got away relatively unscathed. We will never build power and create change by telling someone who's living paycheck to paycheck to pay more for gas or give up driving to work. What's interesting is that the Yellow Vests are a collection of people across the political spectrum. They reveal that class can be a powerful tool of solidarity. But they also demonstrate that solutions to climate change that focus on individual consumption are unpopular and not effective because they disproportionately hurt the wallets of the working class. The politics of the gas tax and of the carbon footprint are ultimately a politics of less for the masses. In order to truly dismantle the power of the rich, to reverse their environmental impact, we need a politics of more. We need to establish democratic control of the means of production.